Today is Tuesday, October 29th, and Scott is here with us to talk about the conflicts in the world. Welcome back, Scott.
Thanks for having me.
And let's start with what has happened between Iran and Israel. And Israeli attack on Iran. On one side, Israelis are talking about that they destroyed all the defense system of Iran. And they're talking about their fighter jets going deep into the Iranian airspace. On one hand, on the other hand, today I talked with Professor Morandi. He said the stock market was doing well right after this attack, and they don't feel that. And overall, what we've seen so far from Iran, it doesn't seem that they're feeling that much of pain because of this attack. But how do you bring these two pictures that are so different together?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's a very difficult thing to do. Sitting here in the United States, I was a battle damage assessment officer during the Gulf War, so I'm pretty experienced in knowing what it takes to put a strike package together to penetrate enemy air defense, to strike given target sets, what we hope to accomplish, what is actually accomplished, and then what we're able to detect that's actually accomplished, because sometimes those are two totally different things. Battle damage assessment is made by combining pilot reports with maybe onboard imagery that the attacking aircraft take, overhead imagery of various degrees of resolution, and maybe other human intelligence reports, intercepted communications, and sometimes you don't get a full picture until later. And I also point out that as somebody who was also a weapons inspector in Iraq in the immediate aftermath of the Gulf War, and many of the sites that we were inspecting had been bombed, and these were sites that I was familiar with while we were bombing them, I was able to, also get a feel for what I, as a battle damage assessment officer, thought had happened and what had actually happened. And oftentimes they're two totally different things. So, what I'm trying to say is, we have an Israeli version of events. And I would note that a lot of the more extravagant claims aren't made by the Israeli government, but by so-called open source intelligence, or people claiming to have sources within these. But we don't have an official Israeli statement put out by the Israeli government that says, for instance, I don't believe I've seen anything from the Israeli government says we've destroyed all of Iran's air defense systems. I didn't see anything from the Israeli government that matched the extraordinary claim of over 640 targets being hit. Just going to tell you that's a very unlikely number. It's not possible with what Israel has, but we'll leave that. And on the other hand, the notion that a nation that has the advanced capabilities of a state like Israel doing nothing, achieving no results whatsoever, is likewise also not plausible. So the Iranian claim to have shot down everything, or that the Israelis missed everything, or what they did was very limited, is likewise not a plausible statement. I know why both sides are saying it. I know why the Israelis want to claim to, want the perception to have accomplished significant results. They're trying to establish deterrence. And if they can create the perception that Israel is capable of inflicting harm on Iran at will, they're hoping to deter Iran from further actions. And the Iranians, don't want to broadcast any actual weaknesses. So if Israel was able to penetrate Iranian defenses, Iran doesn't want to own up to that and admit to it. So they'll deny it in an effort to identify how this penetration took place and what can be done to fix it going forward. Likewise, where they've enjoyed successes, they don't necessarily want to highlight that too much, because confirmation of technical capability, again, is something that Israel can build upon to seek to overcome next time. So we're looking at two parties that are still in a hostile adversarial relationship where there's a real potential of continued military action by either side. And it's clear that we're not going to get the truth anytime soon about what happened on the Israeli attack. But the intelligence data that was leaked by the United States, whether inadvertently or on purpose, indicated that Israel was going to launch an attack that made use of at least 56 air-launched ballistic missiles, so-called air-launched ballistic missiles. The ROCs, which is a version that Israel had used previously to strike an S-300 radar on April 19th near Isfahan. Again, whether it was successful or not, it depends on who you believe. And then what was called the Golden Horizon, which appears to be a adaptation of the Sparrow series of air-launched ballistic missile targets. There's the Black Sparrow, which was supposed to replicate a Scud missile similar to those fired by Iraq during the Gulf War. The Silver Sparrow was supposed to replicate the Shahed-3 missile of Iran, several of which were fired both during True Promise 1 and True Promise 2. And I think it's a modification of the Silver Sparrow known as the Blue Sparrow, which Israel uses not as a target, but as an actual offensive weapon. 18 of these were prepared for strikes. They have a longer range than the ROC. So, the old mission planner in me would say that you're going to use these shorter range systems to take out air defense, carving a path through a seam in the Iranian defenses so that the Golden Horizon or Blue Sparrow missiles will be able to reach the intended targets, probably in the vicinity of Tehran. I actually wrote an article before the strike that speculated that the likely destination of the target for Israel would be the Parchin ballistic missile production facility outside of Tehran, because this is where the ballistic missiles that were used by Iran to strike Israel were made. So there's a direct relationship, if in terms of retaliatory strike, between the targets being struck and what had been done. But also given the rhetoric that Benjamin Netanyahu was employing in the lead up, talking about the decisive nature of the Israeli action and linking it to similar decisive strikes against Hezbollah, the assassination of Nasrallah, and the killing of Hamas leadership, there was a possibility that Israel would seek to strike Iranian leadership targets, a decapitation strike. And again, when you look at the size of a 56 air-launched ballistic missile strike, both target sets could be handled with the amount of strike capacity that was in that. But to give you an example, during the Gulf War, when we struck the Taji missile production facility, repair facility, storage facility just north of Baghdad, the opening strike was carried out by 35 air-launched cruise missiles launched by B-52 bombers. And depending on the specific target, you would either attach one missile to it, or if it was an important target, two missiles to it, because redundancy adds to the increased likelihood of destruction of the getting the proper destructive effects on the target to destroy the target. And so we launched 35 missiles against 8 distinct targets. So when somebody's saying that Israel struck 640 targets inside Iran, that's just an impossibility. To launch 640 air-launched ballistic missiles, you would need, because the best you're going to get is 2 per aircraft, one on each of the designated hard points underneath either an F-15I or an F-16I. And F-35 will not carry these weapons. You would need to do 600, you'd need over 300 F-15Is and F-16Is, and Israel doesn't have that many. So it's just an absurdity to put that many targets out there. To carry out this strike, you needed at a minimum, um, if it's 56, you needed, around 30 strike aircraft. Although some of the aircraft will probably only carry a single weapon, again, depending on the phase that you're in. Each time you put the planes up, you need to combat air patrol. My understanding is that this strike took place in 3 waves of attacks. You're probably looking at around 10 aircraft, 20 air-launched ballistic missiles per wave. Each wave will require its own independent combat air patrol, that is, aircraft overhead, making sure no enemy aircraft infringe on the release point. No Israeli aircraft penetrated, no Israeli fixed-wing aircraft penetrated Iranian airspace. That's not the way this attack worked. This attack, had the Israelis launching air-launched ballistic missiles from a release point to the north of Baghdad in Salahuddin province, probably over a airbase that at one point in time had a significant American and Israeli Balad Air Base in that vicinity. It's an area that Israel is familiar with. The Israelis operated there during the American occupation of Iraq from 2003 up until 2011. And they have familiarity. Israeli aircraft have flown this route before. And so they went and they released from Salahuddin. You had a combat air patrol over that. You figure for each aircraft, maybe 10, then another, standby search and rescue capability, 15, 25. You're looking at around 100 aircraft total involved in this. That's a significant number of aircraft for the Israelis to have operated in this strike. So to go over 56 weapons being delivered would require Israel to tap into resources it doesn't have. Remember, Israel has to keep some in reserve for an emergency retaliation in case Iran retaliates, striking Israeli leadership. Israel has to have something in reserve able to strike Iranian leadership. So you've got to retain reserve, and then you want to again double that reserve because you want to have spares for aircraft to go down, make up combat losses, continue to do air power projection over Hezbollah, over Hamas. The bottom line is the idea that Israel is going to mobilize the totality of its air force to carry out this strike is absurd. They went in with about 100 aircraft. So it's a limited scope and scale strike. Probably, again, if it's not against leadership, and it appears that it wasn't, then it's against ballistic missile production capability. So even if every weapon hit its target, you're not going to take out Iranian ballistic missile capability. You're going to have a hell of a lot more than 56 discrete aim points to accomplish this task. And it's going to be less aim points than that, because remember, about 40 of these rockets were used to clear out air defense. To the degree to which they were successful, we don't know. The Iranians claim to have shot down a lot of these missiles. It appears that some got through to Parchin. We're looking at, less than a half a dozen impact points. We don't know what the, what the results of those impact points are. I have to tell people, be careful about looking at photographs when you aren't able to look at them in 3D or have any other reference point, because simply seeing a black mark on the soil means nothing. When things hit the ground and go boom and there's a burn, you get a scorch mark, but that's reinforced concrete. It doesn't look cratered. And we don't know, anything about the warhead that was used or what kind of warhead that it was. So it's unknown whether there was any damage done at all. Plus, the Iraqis, I'll tell you this, when they knew they were going to be struck by the United States, they had a similar facility called Balad al-Shuhada, solid rocket motor production plant. And in there, they had mixers, very high quality mixers that are used to mix the propellant. They removed the mixers to other locations. So even if you bombed, which we did during the Gulf War, we hit these things. And I'm here to tell you, we hit them hard. We hit them direct shots, F-16s with 2,000-pound bombs. We didn't destroy anything. We put put a crater in the ground. All their facilities were up and running after the war. They repaired them instantaneously. And because they had evacuated all the production equipment, it all was brought back in. It was all functioning. We bombed the hell out of that place during the Gulf War, and we didn't end up damaging anything. So anybody who thinks that the Israelis took out Iranian ballistic missile production capability simply based upon some blurry photographs and some open source intelligence channel on Telegram or Twitter, you're smoking dope. I'm telling you, I've been in this business. I was in this business for a long time, and it just doesn't work that way. Reality, the reality is it's far more difficult to destroy something than people would like you to believe. I think at the end of the day, the Israeli attack was largely a failure, and it failed to accomplish any of its objectives. It failed to do damage to the Iranian ballistic missile production. It failed to disrupt Iranian anti-missile defense, and it failed to deter Iran from future attacks.
What was so amazing, Scott, that I know how things work in Iran, and if any big explosion had happened during this attack, we could have seen these footages coming out of Iran. And Parchin, if something big happens in Parchin, in Tehran, people can see the explosion, everything is coming up. We haven't seen any footages coming out of Iran. That's a huge, that's my...
And they've had accidents at Parchin where there have been big explosions, and I've seen the videos taken by Iranian citizens in Tehran saying, "Oh, look, something big has blown up at Parchin." So yeah, they didn't hit anything. And I have to tell you, if you hit a mixer or you hit any fuel that's being prepared, it's a big explosion. It goes boom.
And the other thing right now, in your opinion, with this attack, Israeli attack on Iran, we can say that we are not anymore distracted from the conflict between Iran and Israel. Can we focus on what's going on in Gaza and what is happening right now in Gaza? And with the situation with the UN, UNRWA is talking about that Israel, the way Israel is treating UNRWA, and nobody seems to care what's going on in Gaza. Nobody's talking about the level of destruction that is happening right now in Gaza.
Well, let's talk about a couple things. Let's talk about things that we aren't talking about. The Israeli Defense Force is being defeated in Gaza as we speak. Its forces are being closed with and destroyed by Hamas. Hamas has not lost the will to resist. Hamas continues to resist, and this has a devastating impact on the morale of the Israeli forces. To show you the depths to which Israel has sunk as a nation state, they had some reservists killed in by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon this past week. At the eulogy of one of these reservists, who was from a family of West Bank settlers, the following was said. They were praising him because when Israel went into Gaza, he went in there saying that he would kill every Arab man, woman, and child he met. And they were saying this is a good thing. And they said he did. He went in there and he killed. They said he was such a lighthearted guy because when the men in his unit were down, he blew up homes, Arab homes, blew them up. So the explosions would improve the morale of the IDF forces. And of course, he's a man who committed murder in the past. He shot a Palestinian settler who was resisting the theft of his land with his olive groves on there. He murdered the man using a weapon provided by the Israeli Defense Force. He was arrested but acquitted, and even with this on his record, he was allowed to join this reserve unit, go into Gaza to commit additional crimes. Now, he finally met his justice in Hezbollah. Hezbollah delivered justice in southern Lebanon. But the point is, the idea that Israel is possessing the most moral army in the world is ridiculous. Israel possesses the most morally corrupt military in the world, and it's paying them. They're paying the price, because as we speak, there's a retired Israeli general who gave an interview last week in the Israeli news, and he said that he's watching the destruction of Israel before his very eyes. He says the Israeli Defense Force cannot continue to do this. They haven't accomplished a single objective. Not a single objective has been accomplished. They haven't defeated Hamas. Hamas still exists politically and militarily and is resisting very effectively. They haven't done anything in southern Lebanon. They're supposed to be 20 kilometers in on a 100-kilometer frontage. They've advanced a couple 100 meters into southern Lebanon, and they're getting the snot kicked out of them. A major attack last night was repulsed by Hezbollah. The forces retreating from the hill that they were trying to seize went into a valley where they continue to be ambushed. The Israelis are evacuating the casualties as we speak under fire. This is the reality. Every square inch of southern Lebanon is a potential ambush zone that has been reconnoitered in advance by Hezbollah. They know exactly what they're doing. The concept that Hezbollah is without leadership is absurd. So they're failing to accomplish their task. They're failing to suppress Palestinian unrest in the West Bank. It's increasing. The level of resistance is increasing. It could become yet a third domestic front. They can't stop the Houthi from shutting down the Israeli economy. The world hates Israel. The world hates Israel. The world hates Israel. This man made that point over and over again. He said, we have lost the world. The world is against us, and we will never get them back. And Iran is defeating Israel. Israel has lost any ability to deter Iran. On top of all this, Israel is falling in on itself. The fact that Israel would allow a eulogy of this nature to take place publicly and be recorded in Haaretz and other Israeli newspapers shows the depth to which Israel has sunk. Israel is a nation without a moral compass, and now it's dividing, it's falling in on itself. Prior to October 7th, the Israeli president had said that Israel is on the verge of an outright civil war, not civil conflict, not civil disobedience, civil war with armed Israelis fighting armed Israelis. And that general said that's happening right now. Israel is breaking up into factions. They're going to fall in on each other. Israel will consume itself. So what the hell do you want to talk about in Gaza again? Because the narrative you're putting forward, and I'm not blaming you, is a Western narrative. Yes, Israel's committing a crime. Yes, it's outlawed UNRWA. Yes, the United Nations will probably let them get away with it. Yes, Israel is slaughtering Palestinians on a daily basis. But this is part of the formula that leads to the total collapse of Israel, because everything I just mentioned only certifies that Israel is a lawless nation operating not just above the law, but with total disregard of the law, an apartheid state that is committing genocide led by mass murderers that nobody in the world respects. How much longer Israel can sustain this is unknown. The general wasn't optimistic. He was saying that this collapse could happen at any time. So, yeah, I know what the headlines say, but I just told you the truth about what's happening to Israel. Israel is a defeated nation led by a corrupt, defeated people, led by an impotent, defeated leader, and their only future is defeat.
It seems that today we've learned that a new Secretary General for Hezbollah, his name is Naim Qassem, if I'm not mistaken, and he's gonna lead Hezbollah right now. On the other hand, some security officials in Lebanon are talking about that U.S. ambassador to Lebanon is trying to shape the political arena in Lebanon, thinking of post-Hezbollah era in Lebanon. When you look at Lebanon today, the way they're fighting, it seems that they're fighting themselves in terms of their leadership right now and their commanders. They're fighting Israelis in the southern part of Lebanon. And on the other hand, you see the government of Lebanon. I don't know how they can manage the relationship with the United States in terms of what's going on between the government and Hezbollah. But it seems that the United States is putting a lot of pressure on them to isolate Hezbollah. Is the United States going to achieve it, in your opinion?
No. First of all, the U.S. doesn't. U.S. has been playing this game in Lebanon for some time now. Find me one instance of American success. I mean, we can take this back as far as you want to, but we sent Marines in. We did that back in the early 1980s. Ended up with the destroyed barracks, 241 dead American Marines and soldiers, and we fled. Lebanon with our tails tucked between our legs. Excuse me. We shelled Lebanon with the U.S. New Jersey. We brought in aircraft, shot down, had pilots taken prisoner, had American sailors taken off of airplanes and executed by Palestinian terrorists because of this activity. We condoned an Israeli invasion and occupation of Lebanon. We provided Israel with the weapons to do this, only to watch Israel get slapped around by Hezbollah and ultimately evicted in 2000. We facilitated the ongoing slaughter of Lebanese civilians. So we supported the Israeli attack against Hezbollah in Lebanon in 2006, only to watch Hezbollah defeat them yet again. The United States hasn't had a single diplomatic success of note. We've built one of the largest embassies in the entire region there. And what does that tell you? We're not there to do diplomacy. We're there to spy. And it's a CIA, headquarters for the region, a Department of Defense headquarters for the region, intelligence collection platform. The last thing we do from Lebanon is diplomacy. In fact, all Middle East diplomacies run out of the nation just a little bit to its south, Israel. If you think an American ambassador to Lebanon can say anything without having it cleared through the American embassy in Jerusalem first, you don't know anything about how American policy works. And so we're there we're playing stupid games. Remember, the stupid games we're playing in Lebanon are an extension of the stupid games we played in Syria. How has that worked out? We've been trying to get rid of Bashar al-Assad for how long now, with how many billions of dollars? That didn't work out very well, and it's going to fail in Lebanon as well. The notion that Hezbollah is defeated is absurd. I mean, yes, Nasrallah was killed. Was that a damaging blow to Hezbollah? 100%. There's no doubt about it. It hurt. And did Hezbollah suffer leadership losses? 100%. I mean, the pagers went off, gutted middle management for temporarily. But Hezbollah is an organization that's designed to function under duress. And so, as Hezbollah has said, every chief has a deputy already identified. And that deputy has a deputy. And that deputy has a deputy. And they all know how to do the jobs they're supposed to do. So when Israel can kill whoever they want, there's somebody in the organization that will immediately take their place without disruption, who knows exactly what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, who needs to do it, and what they need to do it with. And just take a look at the success of Hezbollah's defense of the South. They haven't buckled at all. Israel's running into a buzzsaw, a chainsaw. It ain't Hezbollah running into an Israeli chainsaw. The whole purpose of going into Lebanon was supposed to initially get Hezbollah to withdraw so that 60,000 Israeli soldiers can return to their villages. Not a single one of them is returning to their village. Not now, and maybe not ever. And what's happening is tens of thousands of more Israelis have to flee their homes because Hezbollah continues to maintain the capacity to shell Israeli. And Hezbollah, look at what Hezbollah has done. Instead of repeating the atrocities of the Israelis by targeting civilian areas, they focus instead on Israeli troop buildups in these areas. They sent out a warning the other day to Kiryat Shimona, said, get out of there, not because we're going to destroy your town, but because the Israeli military is assembling the reinforcements they're sending up in your area, and we're going to kill them. And they have. I mean, the Israelis can't assemble troops without Hezbollah raining death and destruction down on them. The Israeli general that gave the interview says that the number of desertions that's taking place is in the dozens of percentage points. Dozens. That means at least 20, up to 24%, depending on the unit, desertion rate. 12% is the norm. Reservists are just refusing to show up. People who go home are refusing to come back. They don't want to go to southern Lebanon because that's a graveyard, and they know it, and they damn well don't want to go to Gaza because they're fighting over the same territory over and over and over and over again. It's like, some Americans who fought in Vietnam. They go in and they clear the Ashau Valley in 1967. They come back on the next tour in 68, and they're clearing the Ashau Valley all over again. Wait a minute, didn't we take that village last year? Yep, but then the enemy got it back, and now we're going to take it again. And in 1970, they're still clearing the Ashau Valley. In 1972, when they left, They're still clearing the Al-Shal Valley. You know how demoralizing that is to fight over the same terrain over and over and over again and get the exact same result: dead Americans, wounded Americans, knowing that at the end of the day you're going to pull back and the enemy is going to reoccupy no matter what. That's what the Israelis are facing in Gaza, but the Israeli military isn't mentally prepared for this. We're talking about some of the soldiers who are least capable of surviving sustained conflict in the world. The Israeli soldier, they're just not built for this sort of thing. They're not an organization that's built to absorb casualties. They are emotionally wrecks right now. And normally I have sympathy. I mean, here in the United States, you know, we talk about, you know, 26, 27 veterans take their life every day in the United States, you know, for PTSD or for other reasons. The suicide rate is insanely high. Israel is going to have a similarly high percentage. I won't shed a single tear for any of those Israeli soldiers. Blow your brains out. I don't care. You've done horrific things. You are the literal epitome of war criminals. If you have a soul in your body, you will stop serving and you will leave Israel and you will confess your crimes to the world and beg the world's forgiveness. But the notion that we're going to feel sorry for you because you suddenly had a pang of consciousness for the stuff you did, that ain't going to happen.
When you look at the Netanyahu's administration ability to convince Israelis that they're winning in Gaza, they're winning in the southern part of Lebanon, because recently a Israeli journalist who was responsible to report on Gaza, on Palestine, and on that region, he said that the government told us we are winning in Gaza with this assassination in Lebanon. We just need to go to the southern part of Lebanon and capture the land. When a journalist who is responsible to report on what's going on in that region is thinking this way, how we can imagine what's going on with the Israeli population right now? It seems they're totally convinced that they're winning.
You have, I mean, Israel is a deeply fractured nation right now. This is what the retired general was alluding to. I mean, you have a handful of people in Israel that will believe whatever the government tells them to believe. These are fanatics. These are truly the criminal element. Many of them are from the United States. I call them Brooklyn Jews or Long Island Jews. These are, you know, people who have gone over to Israel for the express purpose of stealing the land of Palestinians, murdering Palestinians, committing crimes against the Palestinians, knowing that they can get away with it. These are psychopaths, literal psychopaths, who are in Israel to commit crimes. And so they can't afford to turn their back on the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, because his government is that which brings them relevance and power and sustainability. And so they will back him no matter what. You have another group who are just, you know, who again, the greater Israel psychopaths. They're all psychos. I mean, there's nothing normal about any of these people. They view, you know, non-Israelis, non-Jews as subhumans. They, in particular, the Palestinians, the Gazans, as subhumans. They say as much, and then they commit murder. They have no qualms. These are people talking about evicting millions of Palestinians from Gaza, taking over Gaza, and turning it into a Jewish paradise. These people will never change. I mean, let's just be honest. There's only one way to change their mind, is that is to make their mind stop functioning. That generally happens with 5.56 millimeters placed right about there on the forehead. These are true genocidal psychopaths that are incompatible with modern humanity, and yet they exist in Israel in large numbers. And their continued existence poses a threat to not just Israel, but the entire region. Then you have a whole bunch of Israelis who aren't quite as psychopathic, but are willing to live off the labors of the psychopaths. That means that they will remain silent while these crimes are being committed, because secretly deep inside, in places where they don't like to talk about, they think it's cool to have a greater Israel. They sort of think they dig that. They think it's good. They're good with it. So they're the good Germans, the good Jews. They don't talk about it, but they know what's happening. And then there's the other ones who are there and they're trying. You see them demonstrating, you see them speaking out, but to no effect. I mean, they lack the numbers, they lack the political support both at home and abroad. It's very difficult for an opposition movement inside Israel to gain traction unless they have a corresponding opposition movement in the United States that helps feed them. And here in the United States, the American Jewish community, yes, I know people are going to point to the 500 people that shut down Columbia University and the 1,000 that did this. I'm talking about the millions of American Jews who openly advocate on behalf of Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government for the ongoing genocide. I'm talking about the people who have turned their backs on their own history, who've disgraced any notion of the Holocaust. If the Israelis and the Jewish people of the world wanted the Holocaust to remain this notion, the Shoah, the catastrophe, to be something that put people into awe and fell into the mantra of never again, then why do they disgrace it so much? Why do they belittle it so much? Why do they prove that the term genocide means nothing to them? And trust me, if you can lie about the genocide or argue away the genocide that's taking place inside Gaza today, that allows you then to lie about something that to exaggerate, the past, to try and make something in the past bigger. I advise people to go read Elie Wiesel's book. I think it's called Night. He won a Pulitzer Prize for it. Turns out almost the entire book's a lie, but that book helped set in motion, cement the notion of the Nazi genocide against the Jews. I'm not saying it didn't happen. Of course, there was horrific crimes committed. I'm saying that the Israeli state has used the Holocaust industry to promote its reason to exist. And now they've taken that perversion even further by committing the very genocide they claimed was committed against them. I mean, we are talking about a nation that has lost not only its moral compass, but all reason to exist. You cannot justify the continued existence of Israel and the genocidal behaviors that it's exhibiting based upon allegations of genocide dating back to the Second World War. True or not, let's assume everything they say is true, and we know it's not, but everything they say is true. That doesn't justify what Israel's doing. But Israel's actions compel us to take a look at what happened in the past, because I'm here to tell you right now, there's a large part of this Israeli myth that is just that, a myth and a gross exaggeration. And yet you're not allowed to say that. Remember when Ahmadinejad spoke out about this? People called him a Holocaust denier. He never denied the Holocaust. I'm not denying the Holocaust. He simply said that there were a lot of people that were killed during the Second World War, and the Jews were not the majority of them. The majority of the people that died in concentration camps weren't Jewish. They were Russian. In Poles and gypsies and homosexuals and things of that nature. But the notion that what the Nazi crimes against humanity was solely Jewish based is absurd in the extreme. But you can't say that, because then you're called a Holocaust denier. No, I'm just not willing anymore to allow the Holocaust machine to create an intellectual framework that justifies Israeli crimes. The whole thing has to be attacked. You have to tear the whole edifice down and start from scratch. Fact-based recounting of what really happened during World War II and the total disenfranchisement of a Jewish state derived from the crimes of the Second World War. The Jewish state has proven itself incapable of coexisting with mankind, and it must be eliminated. I mean, that's just the bottom line. You can't justify this. If you couldn't let Nazi Germany survive, you can't let Zionist Israel survive.
When you look at the behavior of Jordan, when these interactions between Iran and Israel, Iran attacking Israel, Israel attacking Iran, in both attacks, Jordan was helping Israel. And let's assume Israel is capable of defeating Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, all of them together. Is Jordan understanding that the next step of expansion going to be Jordan? It's not going to be Iran. It's about them. And is there any sort of consideration in their mind in terms of what would be the next step of Israel if they capture all of these lands?
we need to remember that the king of Jordan is a Hashemite. He's not a Palestinian. He's not from that area. He's actually, his family hails from Saudi Arabia. The Hashemites wanted to be the guys who ran all of Saudi Arabia. They wanted to be in charge of Mecca, Medina, and all that. But the Saudi family, our Sauds got it instead. So the Hashemites were given at the end of World War I the Booby Prize. So one Hashemite brother got Jordan under the British mandate, and the other one got Iraq, again under British mandate. In Iraq, there was a revolution that overthrew the Hashemite king, and he and his family were killed in horrific fashion. That's the fate that awaits the current Hashemite king of Jordan. He's an artificiality who has been imposed on a region that doesn't want him. He's not as popular as he'd like himself to believe. The Palestinians hate him, despise him, even though he has a Palestinian wife. He's a total sellout to the British. I would just tell you this. His father, who I worked with, and I worked with the court, was a controlled asset of the CIA and British MI6. I remember delivering an encrypted phone to his the head of his of the Royal Communications, guy named Ali Shukri, and it was at that time it was state-of-the-art encrypted phone that we were using in the United Nations, a derivative of the Stu-3 phone used by the United States, and Shukri managed the communications with the king. And so when I went in to put this on his desk, I noticed that he had other encrypted phones on his desk, 5 additions to the one that I was bringing in. 3 of the 5 were labeled clearly U.S. government agencies, and the other 2 were labeled with British government agencies. I mean, it tells you everything you need to know about who controls, who calls the shots. When I intercepted communications, when I intercepted gyroscopes in Jordan, they were being shipped from Russia through Jordan into Iraq. It was Israeli intelligence, and when it came time to set up a meeting with the king and to get Jordanian participation in intercepting these gyros, the liaison that was done from Israel to the king directly, and then we coordinated with the United States to get me woven into this. But the notion that Jordan is a sovereign, nation doing its own thing is absurd as the day is long. Jordan is a tool of the United States, of Great Britain, and of Israel. The Jordanian king works at the pleasure of the Israeli prime minister, and he knows that. So he can do all the fakery he wants to, run around, pull swords, posture, and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, he's a Hashemite interloper occupying a throne that doesn't belong to him. And one of these days, sooner rather than later, he will be driven from it. If he's lucky, he will be able to flee Jordan, probably to England, where he belongs. He's more British than anything else, Sandhurst educated, and then he can live the rest of his life, in a posh part of London, and in a mansion that's paid for by the British taxpayer, and whatever billions of dollars he's managed to steal from Jordan, or he'll be taken out and dragged through the streets dead. But that's his future. He will not survive what's going on right now. He cannot survive the demise of Israel, and Israel is collapsing, and he is panicked right now. But he let those Israeli planes fly over his territory because he was ordered to let those Israeli planes fly over his territory. He's not in any position to resist what the Israelis wanted to do. He made claims about how it's sovereign Jordan airspace, this, that, and the other thing. There's nothing sovereign about Jordan. Jordan works for, is responsive to the troika of the United States, Great Britain, and Israel.
Is the picture of Israel changing in terms of their military and intelligence might in the eyes of Arab states in the Middle East? The picture of Israel, the power they had before October 7. Right now, do you think that it's the same picture, is diminishing in terms of intelligence, military? And from what we've seen so far from these Arab states, how we can we understand their point of view on Israel right now?
Well, you have to view Israel in a couple ways. One, there's the reality of Israel, and the other is the perception of Israel. And because perception can create its own reality, sometimes the perception of Israel is the more relevant frame of reference. The reality is, anybody who knows the truth about Israel, and believe me, everybody in the region knows the truth about Israel, knows that Israel has been posturing um, to a degree that is not sustainable or could be backed up by itself. You know, even the Israelis came to this realization in 2022 and 2023. They ran back-to-back exercises where they stress tested the IDF's ability to defend Israel from all threats. And at the end of the day, this is what happened. They got beat because they can't win. They don't have the ability to sustain. And none of those wars did Israel fight for a year. All these wars that they fought, they war gamed, you know, would last or designed to last several months. And if Israel hadn't decisively defeated their enemies in that time period, then Israel would lose because they realized that it was economically unsustainable, politically unsustainable, and militarily unsustainable. Well, here we're well over a year now, and the Israeli system is collapsing in on itself. That's the reality of Israel, just how fragile Israel is. But because the United States had thrown its weight behind Israel, and because the European Union followed suit, Israel had the potential to posture on a grander scale. And as long as people believed it, then Israel could operate, you know, in this theater of the absurd. That's what the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor was. That was proposed by Joe Biden on September 9th, I believe, and at the G20 summit in India, immediately echoed by Bibi Netanyahu, who called it the greatest thing in Israeli history, in modern Israeli history. He said this is the most important date in Israel's history because on this date, Israel, you know, graduated to being the world-class economic power that it always aspired to be, where it should be, etc. Perception. And this perception then allowed Saudi Arabia to, I guess, you know, convince itself that normalizing relations with Israel could be not just justified but sustainable, because the perception in the Middle East was that's what was necessary to, you know, to survive long term with the United States. But now the reality comes in. America is a diminishing power with whose you know, stars on the retrograde. We're no longer the brightest star on the horizon. People aren't navigating to the American North Star. They're starting to set course to the BRICS North Star. That includes Iran, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and other regional players in that direction. And two, because of October 7th and what's happened then, the Middle East, the India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor is never going to happen. This thing that was a facade anyways, this house of cards has collapsed and it will not be reborn. And so we shouldn't be talking about, you know, people viewing Israel as anything other than what it is, a failed nation state. It has considerable military power, but that power is collapsing. It just gave its best non-nuclear shot against Iran, and that wasn't good enough. Nobody fears Israel anymore. I think people are more concerned about the collapse of Israel and what will come from that. I think most Arab nations are more concerned about what a Palestinian state would look like and what the ramifications would be with the creation of a Palestinian state for decades of the Arab world turning their back on Palestinian state aspirations. You know, there's a lot of hard feelings out there right now. What the consequences would be regionally through the empowerment of the axis of resistance if it turns out to be the force that brought into being a Palestinian state. What would happen when, you know, Jerusalem becomes once again the center of the Islamic world? Will that prove to be a competition with Mecca and Medina, especially the way Mecca and Medina are currently being run by the Saudis? Could there be a new center of gravity in the Islamic world? Could we see the Shia star on the rise and the Sunni star on the decline? I mean, these are the things that the region's talking about right now. Not about Israel. Israel's a defeated nation. Israel's nothing. It's there, but it's hard to project going forward a scenario that has Israel returning to what it was. Those days are done.
But we cannot, and at the end of the day, we cannot underestimate that they're having nuclear bombs. And they say that if they go down, they will take the world down with them. And does that concern anybody right now if when they use this type of language? Because at the end of the day, the use of nuclear weapon, as you know, as you've done a lot of work on this matter, is so important for the future and the way that you're talking about nuclear bombs.
I think everybody should be worried about any scenario that involves the potential use of nuclear weapons, especially from a rogue nation that has no moral compass, that's shown a proclivity for carrying out genocidal acts without question. If you think Israel would hesitate to terminate the lives of 100 million people through a nuclear holocaust, think again. They've shown no ability to understand or comprehend the inhumanity that they're inflicting on the people of Gaza, Palestine, and Lebanon. They don't care. They literally don't care. I think one of the big problems we face in the United States and around the world is we keep treating Israel as a rational actor. That ultimately we believe Israel would behave the way we would behave in a similar situation, or the way we think we could, meaning that the nuclear option would be the last possible option, and we just wouldn't go and initiate stuff like that irresponsibly. I think there's some people like myself who believe ultimately we might be able to get Israel to go the way of South Africa, which had a covert nuclear weapons program, but ended up declaring it and turning it over for dismantlement. That if there is going to be an Israel that emerges from the catastrophe that it's created for itself, that the conditions of Israel's continued existence would include denuclearization through international inspections carried out by the International Atomic Energy Agency, along the lines of similar disarmament operations that were done in Iraq and in South Africa. Maybe this could be done in concert with, bringing the Iranian nuclear program under control, parallel programs, so that there's an element of reciprocity, etc. But the reality is, until we address Israel's nuclear weapons program head on, and the first part of that is to acknowledge openly that it exists. We can't just simply allow release classified documents to make a passing reference to Israel's nuclear weapons program without pretending that they actually exist. To continue to allow Israel to engage in this deliberate ambiguity program is absurd. We should declare them as a nuclear power, therefore declare them to be in violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, declare them to be international pariahs, and tell Israel that they will have sanctions put on them similar to or greater than the sanctions that were placed on other pariah states that were found to be in non-compliance, like North Korea, like Iran, until which time Israel declares the totality of its nuclear enterprise and subjects that to, dismantlement and inspection by international authorities. This is the only pathway to a continued Israeli existence that could possibly exist, because you can't allow Israel, this genocidal, maniacal state, to exist with nuclear weapons. That's like handing a sawed-off shotgun to an autistic child. Only bad things are going to happen.
As time goes by, it seems that the position of Donald Trump is improving. I don't know, in the United States, in terms of 2024 presidential election. Donald Trump, in his recent interviews, he said that he's not interested in having any sort of escalation with Iran and Russia. And J.D. Vance recently had an interview in which said that we are not interested in having a big war, a war with Iran in the Middle East. Israelis want us to have, but we are not interested in having that type of war with Iran. And on one hand, you watch this type of rhetoric coming out of the Trump people. And on the other hand, when you see they're talking about Mike Pompeo, you're talking about Nikki Haley, Tom Cotton, these people who we know their policy, their vision toward the Middle East, the way that they're supporting Israel, or maybe Ukraine in that case. Is that gonna, how do you see if Donald Trump wins? Let's assume that. Is he going to bring a drastic change to Washington?
Donald Trump, in a recent interview, admitted that when he came into power in 2000, after the 2016 election, that he was not prepared to govern, and that he surrounded himself with people that came from the establishment. You know, the Republican side of the establishment. People who didn't have his best interests in heart. You couldn't say had the best interests of America. They had pursuing the policy objectives of a neoconservative element that had not run for election. The American people didn't vote for this neoconservative element, and yet here they are because Trump didn't have anybody to fall back on. They were empowered. Mike Bolton, John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, people of this ilk. And they were disastrous. And as a result, all the things that Trump said he believed in, like making better relations with Russia, things he tried to do, like denuclearizing North Korea, he wasn't able to accomplish. He was stabbed in the back, and at the end of the day, his foreign policy was just a disaster. The problem I have is what's to say he's not going to fall into the same trap? I know, he has sat down with people like, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Tucker Carlson, and others, and said these are the, Elon Musk, whether you like them or not, it doesn't matter. They're not the establishment. They're the anti-establishment. These are the kind of people he should have surrounded himself with the first time. People whom, if they do get appointed to positions of power, will be able to shake things up. The big question, though, is Donald Trump capable of allowing people like this to steal his thunder, to steal the limelight, to shake things up? Or is he going to insist that he be the front man, that it has his stamp of approval on it? And what happens when they challenge him on some core things like, well, you don't want to go to war with Iran, but that means you're going to have to say no to Israel. But you took $100 million from this Jewish widow. Boss, what are you going to do? I don't have confidence in Trump's ability to stay the course. At the end of the day, I think he's a fundamentally weak man, and that his biggest weakness is his hubris and his narcissism. His inability to delegate responsibility, his unwillingness to delegate responsibility. And as such, he'll fall victim to his most base behaviors. And he's not a diplomat. He's a man who gets angered very easily, gets insulted very easily. And when you're the president, you get insulted, you end up giving speeches before the United Nations Security Council or General Assembly where you shout out fire and fury, fire and fury. And in this day and age where we are in very delicate relations with both Russia and China, shouting fire and fury may deliver just that, fire and fury. Iran is not in the mood to make any compromises to anybody. I don't think Donald Trump understands that. He thinks he's coming to the table with some sort of ability to put pressure on Iran. What? You backed out of the nuclear agreement. You stopped, having the potential of economic trade. You've sanctioned Iran to the nth degree. You've threatened to bomb Iran. You've empowered Israel to attack Iran. And all Iran has done is build up counters to this that put Iran in a favorable position. And you want Iran to do what? Negotiate that away because you, Donald Trump, say they should? Iran's not going to bend over backwards for Donald Trump. He claims he has the ability to make a magic phone call to Vladimir Putin. I don't think that ability exists. I don't think it ever existed, but it definitely doesn't exist to this day. And to do the same to Xi Jinping, to threaten Xi Jinping with what, an economic war? Have you looked at the state of the American economy versus the state of the Chinese economy? I'll tell you, one can survive an economic war, the other one can't. And so in order to do realistic policies, Donald Trump's going to have to back down. He's going to have to, eat a little bit of crow, admit policy failure in the past and not take such a strong stance going forward to yield the road in large degree to his current adversaries. I don't think it's in Donald Trump to do that. So I don't have the confidence that Donald Trump is going to go rolling in there doing great things. I'm very afraid that he's going to go rolling in, think that he's going to make great things happen. And when they don't, he's going to revert to, past form, which is to fire the people that are giving him the advice of being friends and having non-adversarial relations, and surround himself again with the neocons who will end up getting us involved in a war. And a war with Russia means a nuclear war and we all die.
Do you think right now, is Russia concerned about what's going on in Ukraine? Because today we've learned that the Russian Federation is conducting a drill to use nuclear weapons. And how do you find right now the situation in Ukraine? We had Lloyd Austin visiting Kiev during the BRICS summit. Right now, do you think that we can, as you mentioned, I personally don't believe that Donald Trump going to change it drastically, but do you think the deep state, those people who are making decisions in Ukraine, are going to send, at the end of the day, are going to escalate the conflict with Russia in the aftermath of 2024?
To what end? The Ukraine has lost. There's not a rational actor out there right now that can articulate a scenario that has Ukraine winning. No one. You have a bunch of irrational people there talking about the need for Ukrainian victory, but there's not a single person that can articulate a path to victory for Ukraine, especially one that starts from the current state of affairs. Total collapse on the Donbass front. Total collapse. Kursk, 2,000 Ukrainians surrounded, the other being slaughtered. The Ukrainian, we've been sending in these shipments. They're getting blown up. So even all the ammunition we're sending in is not making it out of the port of Odessa, let alone across the trains and into warehouses that are hit. The Russians have full-scale dominance. And we're rolling into wintertime when 90% of Ukraine's thermal power generation capability is gone permanently. It's not coming back, and you can't bring in enough power generation equipment to compensate for that. So you're going to see literal societal collapse. So you have military collapse at the front, societal collapse, you have economic collapse. Ukraine has no functioning economy. It needs continued underwriting by the West, and the West is getting tired of paying that bill. And you're looking at, the political collapse of Zelensky over the course of this winter. So remind me again, as we emerge from the winter of 2024, 2025, what victory looks like and how do you get there? This means that the only people talking about a potential path for victory have to articulate scenarios that are so extreme as to make you wonder what their purpose is. I mean, even Poland's given up talking about coming to the aid of Ukraine. They're now talking about building a new defensive line because they've accepted Ukraine's lost. It's finished. Can't help it. So they're talking about building a defensive line to separate them from the Russians and the Belarusians. This is the reality. The only hope Ukraine has is to get permission to use long-range weapons, and Russia has told the West what the consequences of that will be. And I think this current nuclear exercise just proves that. Russia's sending a signal. We've told you what the consequences would be. I think your audience is guilty like everybody else. You forgot that we almost all died on September 14th. I mean, people seem, well, we didn't, therefore everything's okay. No, it's not. The reason why we didn't die is the Russians put the marker down that if you allow long-range strike weapons to, American, British provided, to be used by the Ukrainians to strike inside Russia, you become a party to the conflict, and Russia will hold you accountable to including using weapons against your soil. And those weapons may be nuclear in nature if you want to take it that route. In 72 minutes after the first nuclear weapons used, we're all dead. So, guys, that situation still exists today. Russia's simply reminding us that they're not joking. They're not bluffing. Russia's won this war. There's nothing we can do to stop this. But if we want to escalate, then Russia tells us what the price of escalation will be. And that will be a nuclear war, and we'll all die. So that's what's going on here. Russia's in no danger of losing the Ukrainian conflict. But Russia just wants to make sure that the West doesn't go totally insane in trying to prevent the total collapse of Ukraine, which is inevitable.
The problem here is that the way they're talking about North Korean soldiers being in Russia, fighting for Russia, it seems that to me that they're preparing for everything to send NATO soldiers to Ukraine to fight Russia. This is huge. This is problematic. That's why I think that in the aftermath of 2024, they may make a case that Russia is using North Korea and let's go fight Russia directly.
Who's going to go fight them? Name one country that's going to put boots on the ground inside Ukraine to fight Russians. Go. I'll play the Jeopardy theme song because you're not going to get any nation to do that because it's war. It's absurdity. You have idiots saying, oh, if the North Koreans are in Russia, therefore we will not, Lindsey Graham, we'll have to send our boots, Tom Cotton, boom, boom, boom. You're not seeing anybody in a position of power talking about that because, A, we don't have any boots to send. Where are we going to get them? Got 100,000 troops in Poland, Scott. How many of those are combat troops? 26,000? So we got 26,000 trigger pullers, and we've got to project them in over a line of communication that'll be vulnerable to Russian interdiction. We just talked about what it took to put an Israeli strike package into Iran. Imagine it's going to take a lot of Allied aircraft to put a similar strike package into Russia to start doing this, and Russia will respond. It becomes a big shooting war thing. Go boom, boom, and we all die. There's no nation ready to project power into Ukraine, so it's an absurdity to even talk about this. And then the other thing is, what is the legal basis of this? Russia signed an agreement with North Korea. That agreement allows for them to come to the assistance of others in times of war. So if Russia and North Korea were to agree for North Korean troops to come in, there's nothing illegal about it. And first of all, if the North Korean troops were, for instance, deployed in Kursk, where all the rumors have it, that's Russian soil. How's that NATO's business? And if they're evicting Ukrainian troops from Russian soil, again, how's that anybody's business? It's not. But the thing is, nobody's proven that this is the case. No one's demonstrated that there are North Korean troops actually on their way to the Kursk front. So this is a big propaganda war, big propaganda battle being fought right now. But when I get nervous is when Americans and NATO people stop talking, because then I take them seriously. But as soon as their lips are moving, they're playing a propaganda exercise. So the fact that you have Americans and NATO and everybody talking about North Korean troops means they've got nothing. Nothing. Literally nothing's happening. Nothing's going to happen. They're not going to do anything. This is just a propaganda show. And I'll tell you this. I'll believe that North Korean troops are in Kursk when I see them. Until then, it doesn't make any sense from a military standpoint, anything. It doesn't make any sense at all.
And talking about last time we talked, we didn't have time to talk about BRICS summit, and in which Russia and China together condemn what's going on in Gaza for Palestinians. And do you think this summit was capable of doing anything in favor of Palestinians, as long as we have the we know that the UN is not capable of doing anything substantially in terms of what's going on in Gaza, in Palestine, in Lebanon. But what, in your opinion, what BRICS is capable, what is BRICS capable of doing in terms of what the situation in the Middle East?
As it's currently configured, not a damn thing. There's nothing BRICS can do, nor is BRICS expected to do anything. You know, I don't know why the world's rushing this. You know, BRICS, you know, they were, you know, when BRICS was created, you had people who were sort of the equivalent of, you know, grade school sweethearts, you know, innocent, platonic, you know, friends on the playground. You know, last year in Johannesburg, you know, there was a courtship. And this year in Kazan, the relationship was consummated. And you want him to give birth to a child right now that's fully grown adult, ready to do adult things? That ain't happening. BRICS now has consummated its union. And so they're in the process of, you know, a gestation period where they're now going to grow into something that's meaningful, has substance, etc. That's going to take time. It could take years. It could take decades. But the bottom line is that what was started in Kazan is basically a revolution against neocolonialism and American unilateralism. It doesn't mean that the neo-colonial enterprise disappears overnight and America disappears overnight. No, there will be a struggle. The struggle will be economic in nature. It will be diplomatic in nature. It will be, you know, global in scale. But it's going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight. So anybody who thought that BRICS was going to come together and suddenly solve all the world's problems doesn't understand what BRICS is. You know, it's like I mentioned the Bandung Conference of 1955. Most people now have to go and Google it because they don't know what I'm talking about. But it was a big conference put together by India and China together with Indonesia and you know, what today we call the global south. At the time we called the third world, primarily Africa and in Asian countries that were emerging from the yoke of colonialism. And the Bandung Conference, the purpose of Bandung was to bring to life the principles set forth in the 5 principle statement that India and China had put forward in 1954. Bandung Conference didn't achieve what it wanted to achieve because it took place during the Cold War, and the third world aspirations, what became known as the non-aligned movement, got suppressed by Cold War politics. But at Bandung, Zhou Enlai, the Chinese premier, said, what's happening in this conference guarantees that the colonial era will be finished within 20 years. And by 1975, the colonial era was indeed finished. Now, what was supposed to replace it was this emergence of the third world, a multilateral, consensus-driven, entity, but that never was able to mature because it never was able to complete the gestation period. Let's just say that the Cold War aborted it. And instead of, a post-colonial era, what we got was the neo-colonial era in the era of American hegemony, which is a neo-colonialistic relationship between the United States and the rest of the world. So the neo-colonial era has been governing unfettered since, 1975 onwards. What BRICS is the Bandung Summit of the Conference of the Modern Era, without a Cold War that's going to destroy it. The BRICS Summit is the delivery of the promise made by Russia and China when they met on February 4th, 2022 in Beijing and signed their 5,000-word joint declaration about rejecting the rules-based international order, rejecting neo-colonial behaviors on the part of France and Great Britain and others. So that's what we're seeing. And they met and they have given birth to an institution that now has, established ways of building consensus. Russia ran 200 events in the lead up to the summit. Many of them were at the ministerial level. This institutionalized the processes of bringing nations together and talking and working out problems. Eventually, this institutionalization will mature to the level where BRICS will be able to weigh in effectively on issues like Middle East peace, Palestine, etc. But for the moment, these institutions, they've just been given birth to, and now they have to grow, and they have to, solidify. They have to figure it out. You have to learn to crawl, then you'll walk before you run. You can't expect BRICS to be out there winning, Olympic gold medal winning times on the 100-yard dash when they haven't even learned how to, crawl. So it's unrealistic. And what'll happen in the meantime is that the individual BRICS nations will work together to come up with common policy objectives, because they did agree on principles that they will adhere to collectively. And those principles will eventually gel into a unified way of problem solving that will hopefully be used to supplement the United Nations system, if the United Nations system can be reformed. But if not, then to replace the UN as one of the world's leading geopolitical decision-making bodies.
Yeah. Just to wrap up this session, we had the agreement between Russia and China in terms of their intelligence, militarily. Their economy is totally connected with Russia and North Korea, and we're about to have a comprehensive agreement between Iran and Russia. It seemed that whoever wins in the United States in 2024 would face a new reality of the world in terms of militarily, in terms of the economy. And do you think this change that is happening, it's not drastically, but it's changing little by little, gradually it's changing. Do you think that would change the United States foreign policy in 2024? And maybe that would benefit peace in the Middle East or even in Ukraine?
I think anybody who's hoping that the United States will be a force for peace is hoping in vain. We're not a force for peace. We're not wired for that. The United States exists for war. We're a nation built on the principles of war. The modern incarnation of the United States is all about war. This is what Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address in 1961, about the rise of the military-industrial complex working in concert with the United States Congress to destroy American democracy. It succeeded. American democracy today is literally a shadow of what it could be and what it should be. It doesn't matter that we can all go out and vote on November 5th. Look who the hell we're voting for. If you're here to tell me that the symptoms of American democracy that have manifested itself so that we have Kamala Harris representing the Democratic Party and Donald Trump representing the Republican Party, and you're supposed to tell me that this represents a politically healthy America, you're wrong. What it shows is America is the most unhealthy nation in the world when it comes to democracy and politics. We are diseased, deeply diseased. We have an establishment that requires global confrontation in order for the United States to thrive. Our entire means of interfacing with the world economically, diplomatically, etc., is through the interface of violence. Look at how we propose to solve the Israeli-Gaza conflict by providing billions of dollars more military assistance to Israel. We have no other option. We've got nothing else. Even to put pressure on Israel, it's stop selling Israel arms. As if weapons are the only thing we do, because it is the only thing we do. Look at Ukraine. That's all we have. Look how China interfaces with the world. The Belts and Roads Initiative, a $10 trillion infrastructure development program that has allowed China to win over the hearts and minds and pocketbooks of the world while we seek to destroy everything. The lead American representative globally these days is the regional combat commander, in the Middle East, Central Command. If you're the ambassador of a major Middle Eastern country, you don't get to do anything unless the CENTCOM representative's there, because the military's calling the shots. The same thing with Europe. It's the NATO people that count. Same thing in Asia. It's all about the military. The Pacific Command takes the lead on everything. Guys, if you think this is good, you're wrong. The military is not meant to be a diplomatic agency, and yet it has become the most important diplomatic agency of the United States, which tells you that our reason for existence isn't peace, it's war. That doesn't change by simply electing a new president. Donald Trump is an instrument of war. He speaks the language of peace superficially, but he's the instrument of war, of power. How he plans on projecting American economic power without backing it up with American military force. And it's always implied, even when he speaks peace, he's going to make the magic phone call. And I mean, his threatening to Putin, I'll make those domes disappear. How, Donald? You're going to hug him to death, baby? Oh, no, you're going to bomb Russia. So you're threatening violence again. That's all we know how to do. That's all the Democrats know how to do. That's all the Republicans know how to do. It's economic violence. It's military violence. It's political violence. The CIA exists to overthrow your government. Ask the Georgian people how it feels to be an American ally right now when you actually held a fair and free election that got a fair and free democratic outcome, and the United States refuses to accept it because we didn't want that outcome. And so now we're going to go in and we're going to cause problems. We have the CIA trying to stir up a Maidan type, revolution in Tbilisi like they did in Kiev. That's all we do, ladies and gentlemen. I wrote an article. I called it the American Midas touch. Because if you go back and talk about King Midas of ancient Greek mythology, people think, oh, that means that everything you touch is gold. You have the golden touch. Yeah, it also means that everything you touch dies. That's the American Midas touch. We're trying to turn everything into gold for us. But at the end of the day, we touch you, you die. Because it's all we know how to do is kill. Kill for our benefit. And so that's where we are right now. None of these candidates represent a force for peace. And America will never be a force for peace as we're currently configured.
Scott, we have two questions from our audience. Let me play it for you. The first is the earthquake on October 29th. Was the attack on Iran a fake out while Israel hit the tunnels in North Gaza? How would you respond to this?
I think you're comparing apples and oranges. Why do you need to fake Iran out in order to hit tunnels in North Gaza? Why can't you do both concurrently? I don't understand the question. I'm not being disrespectful. Maybe there's just a language problem, an interpretation problem.
Yeah,
but
I didn't get it as well. It seems that he's trying to say that the earthquake was to distract people from what's going on in Gaza.
But again, I can't make that correlation. So yeah. I can't. I don't even know how to answer the question.
And the other one is, do you think that Iran will attack Israel?
As an American, with an American mindset, I can come up with an argument that Iran retains de facto deterrence, having demonstrated the capacity to strike Israel, and that Israel has not achieved similar deterrence because their message to Iran was watered down for any number of reasons. That I could articulate to the supreme leader that we call this a wash and we move forward, that Israel's losing the war. We don't need to expand this conflict. Let's just let Israel fester in its own juices for the moment and finish it. But I'm not Iranian. Professor Morandi, whom you know very well, and whose opinion I respect very much, has what I would call an informed Iranian position, and that is that Iran will strike back because it has no choice but to strike back. Iran can't retain this deterrence, and deterrence has a lot to do with psychology and perceptions. And so, having me as an American, I perceive things in certain ways. My analytical models are based on assumptions that may or may not exist in an Iranian analytical model. So I have to defer to him in answering this question and say yes, because a very well-informed, level-headed, rational Iranian professional believes that Iran will respond, I will defer to that position.
Thank you so much, Scott, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
Thanks for having me.